Macabre Derek here with another RPG rant. Now, what are we discussing today? Well, I had a subscriber end up asking me, "Hey Derek, how do you go about building NPCs? What's your approach to it? How is it that you go through it from concept to stats?" So I figured I'd end up running through that whole shtick. So this one's for you, Arthur. All right. So where do we begin? The first thing we end up starting with is a concept. Now, what this concept could be doesn't have to be much, right? It's that kernel. So I'm just thinking right now, homeless guy. Yep, that's it. Just your neighborhood bum. Who is this individual? I'm gonna put him in World of Darkness because apparently that's what I do. Is I like to shove concepts into World of Darkness, see how they float. How do we begin with this? All right. So we know he's homeless. Why is he homeless? Hmm. Well, if we're to believe statistics, there's a good portion of soldiers who have come back from wars, who've come back from tours, who just never really got a fair shake, quite frankly. It's a tragedy that happens very much. A person who ends up dedicating their life to end up serving to protect. Could have been a cop, could have been anything else. They ended up becoming a soldier. They ended up going to other countries. They had to end up going through some really horrific shit in order to end up maintaining the freedoms and beliefs of their country. And when they come back, well, they have a particular skill set, and that skill set sometimes doesn't mesh too well. Maybe they come back with some horrific trauma or something along those lines. So let's think about this and go, okay, well, what exactly was it that stopped this soldier from getting back on his feet? Did he have a family? These are questions that immediately come to mind. Don't be afraid to go a little stereotypical. Stereotypes do exist for a reason, unfortunately, and in this case, we're going to use it. So I'm picturing him. And I legitimately am picturing. I'm looking right here towards my light, and I'm just trying to figure out what am I seeing. I'm seeing a beard, unshaven, dirty, probably still hanging and onto duffel bag. Maybe he's got something left of his fatigues. Who knows? Anything to keep warm at this point. Where that's kind of maybe that's the theme of the character to consider, is that he hangs on to what he had, and the reason he hangs on to it is first of all, necessity. What used to be a point of pride in his life has now scaled down and has fallen into rags that he wears only to keep warm at nights. Probably had a family. What happened? Why didn't his family take him in? Well, maybe it's a case of he's fallen out with his family. We're talking mother and father here, sisters, brothers. Might have been an only child, maybe not. Don't be afraid to consider those human ties, right? Everybody's got somebody they're attached to. In this case, he maybe moved to the city because he didn't want his family to see him in this state. He's ashamed. He's ashamed that this is what's happened to him, and he doesn't want anybody to look at him, especially it would hurt too much. Where he went from hero to zero. So we got a little bit of psychology going on here now, don't we? We got a little bit of history, and you could stop right there. You really could. I don't like to stop right there. I'd like to actually develop a few things further, so let's continue. If we're building him up, okay, he was a soldier. What did he do? I'm thinking just, basic homeboy or farmer's boy yeah, kind of situation. Went into the military, did his tour, probably an infantryman, something along those lines. Typical soldier. We're not going in. When I say typical soldier, I'm referring to movie styles. I'm not referring to somebody who's actually ended up going through the whole shtick, because I personally have not ended up serving my country in that fashion. So, when you're in this kind of situation where you have not done this, you've not, but you want to portray it, you're going to want to end up pulling in a little bit of knowledge. You're going to want to pull in something as simple as understanding ranks, understanding basic structure of the military, especially the branch they may have served. In this case, we're talking Army. You're wanting to learn some basic terms and mannerisms. Now, what was it that happened to him over there? It's not uncommon for few soldiers to end up coming back with post-traumatic stress disorder. Some of them are having difficulties function, and I've heard horror stories on all it takes is something like a firework going off, and these people are back in it. It's much more complicated than that, but I'm trying to go base overview. Let's consider. So that has made him struggle to function. This is something he's dealing with. He starts to end up coming up, and he's trying to end up keeping away from his family because he knows what he's had. One point, he maybe had the love of his life. Yeah, let's give him something that he really had. And it's not like, oh, he was all tragic. No, he had things going for him. He used to have a wife. Maybe he has a kid somewhere. Son or daughter that is out there somewhere. And that's the part that makes it worse. He could go back. He wants to go back, but he doesn't. He doesn't want them to see their father disheveled, wearing rags, old fatigues, and draped in blankets, pushing a shopping cart because, quite frankly, that's all he owns. And not even that. It's a stolen shopping cart. He keeps the duffel bag and whatever else he can. A few bits of cardboard, and when it hits night, he turns that cart sideways and huddles around that duffel bag full of whatever is left of his life, with only bits of cardboard weaved in between the steel of the shopping cart in order to break away from the wind, because winter is here, trying to keep him from being buried alive in the snow and giving him a place where the wind doesn't cut so bad. That's his life. I picture this man looking at old photos, the most precious thing in his life. He looks back to it and he says, someday when I figure this out, I'll be coming back home. It's tough. You think about what's he like in that regard. Sentimental, maybe. Bit of a hard ass when he has to be. That train doesn't go away. But he's always afraid he's going to hurt somebody. Been picked up more than once or twice from the cops. Probably has a drinking problem at that point. And everybody's like, well, drunk homeless guy, how stereotypical. But no, think about that. You will do pretty much anything to numb yourself in this position. You want to stop feeling this. Now, in the case of vampire, I have a particular NPC in mind that is not of my own design. But I thought about it, and I've experienced a story very similar to this. This does happen on occasion. So we're going to have him embraced by Clan Malkavian. Why are we going to embrace him by Clan Malkavian? Because he suffers from PTSD? No. He's not chosen because he struggles with what would be considered derangement. No, he isn't chosen at all What he is a feeding victim that went too far. He was a cheap meal. That's it. He was huddled in that shopping cart trying to keep out of the cold, and a predator of the night found him. One with a conscience. One who maybe had some ties themselves. Maybe they were, the son or head daughter of a soldier, and when they're feeding on this person, when they realize what they'd done, that they lost control for a little while, they can't stand to let this man die, so they chance it. They drop that precious blood into his mouth and turn him. Now the nightmare really does begin. You're an unauthorized kindred. You're not supposed to be. You were never supposed to be. So now society doesn't want you. You don't want to face the one bit that does. And now you're more dangerous than ever. You subsist off the blood of human beings. And every night you are reawakened to that trauma. It's not all bad. No. We think about this individual. What else is there? He's a survivalist. He's humble in that regard. He knows what it takes to survive in situations that most would give up. He's hardened, resolute in that. So we have a loose understanding of who this person is. That's it. That's a loose understanding. We would go in for details, trying to figure out names of his family, what the relation was like. We'll end up going through that, but that's going to turn into a very long video. And I'm one of these people who will easily put 5 to 10 hours into an NPC. So, that being said, the soldier become a homeless man, lost everything, hung on to what life there was, and that was snuffed out, and now embraced into Clan Malkavian. He doesn't know why he's been left alive, or what kind of strings needed to happen in order to make his sire survive. Maybe the sire didn't. Let's take something out of bloodlines, right? The sire gets punished, the child is spared. Maybe he's thrown into something that makes a little bit more sense to him. Thrown into Clan Ventru, that clan that always has this tendency of taking in others that don't have guidance. Starts to make him feel like a soldier again. Plays to it. Doesn't want to push him too far, but he is a soldier. He is capable of great acts of violence. And he's a predator. So that's something that needs to be either reined in or exterminated. This gives him his setup. So you have, let's consider the stats here. If I were to put them in order, I would make it physical. Then I would do intellectual. Then I would do social. The reason I would do it like this is because his social standings in this point has been getting kicked down. If he was able to do that personal magnetism, 90% of your problems are actually solved. A person with a good amount of personal magnetism and able to talk the talk can usually get out of most situations in this regard. And considering the state he was in, I don't believe he would end up having those. I would think if we were to be more specific, he would be appearance 1, maybe 2. We'll treat it as a 2 and then say treat it as a 1 if he hasn't taken care of shaving and all that kind of stuff at the start of every night, which he needs to do because he's going to revert right back to homeless man every single time he wakes up. Let's say if he's cleaned up, he's not bad looking, so we're going to put a 2 there. Manipulation of 1. He struggles to get people to do what he needs unless he's in army fatigues. He realizes the weight that his uniform used to carry, because without it, while he still has some of the mannerisms, people, maybe his perspective is that people only respect him when he's in uniform, when the uniform was what they were respecting, not him, not the individual, just the uniform, just what it represented. But he himself, that might actually be a bit of psychology that we can consider. That maybe there's a little bit of want to go back, or maybe there's a little bit of resentment that the only reason you would say thank you for your service is because you saw me in uniform. You knew that I was a soldier. Outside of that, you wouldn't give me the time of day. But in that, I would also make it charisma 3. Why charisma? Because he has been in situations where he can be a leader. When those moments really come up, he's not a bad guy. He's the kind of person you want to have a beer with. You want to end up getting to know him when he can. It's just people didn't give him that first encounter. So that's his weakest stats. As far as his intellectual stats, I would have to go wits 2. He doesn't strike me as a person who is, well, no, let's go wits 3. Let's go wits 3. The reason we're going wits 3 is because he's been living in what is effectively a shopping cart converted into a cardboard box. You're dealing with somebody who's resourceful. You're dealing with somebody who's learns to make the most out of their situation. He's the kind of person who picks up empties and can spot what it is that can be recycled for just a little bit of loose change in order to end up going on and getting something to eat. He knows how to worm his way into the homeless shelter and be able to find some place where he's not going to freeze to death. He knows places where nooks under stairs that security guards don't check, so at least he can have a warm place to sleep for the night. Maybe he's learned to use public washrooms just to end up keeping himself relatively sanitary, even though he lives amongst the refuse. Yeah, I can definitely see him as a wits 3 thinking about it. Intelligence, farm boy, trained in military, I would say at best a 2. He's not dumb. He's just not overtly educated. That's not his field. So if we're going to end up pushing that, I would say would probably make his perception 3. He's still got those eyes of a soldier. He's trained to look for silhouettes. He's trained to look for glints of metal in the dark. He's trained to do this over and over, in which case that training has never fully left him. Very good shot in that regard. Very capable of seeing at a half decent distance, especially now that he's embraced as a Malkavian, which I didn't know what a clan he was going to be until afterwards, so just kind of threw that one in there. Well, there you go. As for physical, I don't view him as overtly strong when he was embraced. Maybe when he was in his prime and when he was training, he would have been strength 4. But he's getting up in years. He's been doing this a while. He hasn't seen his child grow up. His wife can't find him because he's moved to a different city. And, maybe they've given up hope. But that training he's never maintained it, mostly because, does he really want to go back to it? But there's still that strength. This kind of person is tough as nails, though. There's a reason he's managed to live through harsh winters. So I would say I would honestly put him at a stamina of 4 to represent that. He goes through stuff that, and that's the thing, resilience. He goes through stuff that most people would never consider being able to live through. So we're going to end up taking a look at the rest of it, and we're going to make him above average strength and above average dexterity. It's not something he uses too frequently, but that training is still there. The physicality, that sheer strength, though, that's not him in his prime, but he's still damn strong. Damn strike, sight stronger than a pencil pusher, that's for sure. So I got a loose set of stats. So you need to consider when you're going fleshing through, and I'm not going to go through the full lineup, but I'm giving you a brief overview of how I'm associating stats. All right. So let's take a look at what's his training like. Military is a big thing, right? Another thing is survival. Obviously, right? Definitely has some firearms. We probably have a fair amount of drive. Um, he intimidation. You see somebody who's homeless, who's angry at you and coming at you with a bottle, and you tell me you are not intimidated. It can get pretty messy. So we're going to use those as baselines. Stats that he has above 1 dot in. And that just tells you a few little tidbits. So another one he might know of, he might know politics just because he's used to or been experienced around policy. So he might have 1 dot in that, 1 dot in the law, especially when it comes to military. When I was thinking merits flaws, we definitely need to push mentor in there. We need to give this fallen soldier, this forgotten hero, a mentor into the world of darkness. He needs it more than anything, because if he does not validate his existence, he's going to be right for the sun. That being said, if the right people come along, might be able to take under his wing and teach him. He might find a way to end up finding purpose even in death. And with his ability to withstand the cold, no longer a factor, with his ability to gain strength and power that he's never considered, just maybe he can turn this franchise around. Who knows? As far as any kind of bits you would end up looking at, I would say if your contacts and resources are going to be homeless or people dealing with homeless, is if you can get those people, that's an information network. That's a forgotten information network. Probably you'd have closer ties to the Nosferatu in that case, because there's a lot of Nosferatu who use the homeless to keep an ear out. Things are forgotten. So are people. At that point, I think just walking through this, you have a very good understanding of what kind of NPCs I end up building, how I go about them. And this kind of NPC, I'm probably going to spend another 2-3 hours just fleshing out, just making sure all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted, making sure it works. And this is the kind of individual you'll have to end up dealing with in a future campaign. Or something better. Who knows? Hopefully that ends up helping you guys out. And, well, it's been a pleasure, I should say. And it's good to be back. So shout out to Arthur who ended up asking me on how to end up going over NPCs, and hopefully this ends up answering all of your questions. If this did help, don't forget to end up liking, share, subscribe. You know the drill. And until next time.